Hello, everyone. My name's Destiny. I have a podcast called Political Lemonade. I plan to run for president of the United States, and I am here today to collaborate with Crystal and do a series on the U.S. prison system. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about how the U.S. prison system originated. This is going to be a couple of episodes covering different topics. So today we're just going to talk about where it originated. So the U.S. prison system is the worst in the developed world. Many jails didn't begin as a form of punishment in the earliest centuries. People would stay in a holding cell until they paid off their debt or to await punishment. And punishment during these times at a capital level usually consisted of being hung, burned alive, stoned, boiled, or drowned. Executions were public. Many people would come out, and if they weren't being killed, they would be whipped, branded, have a limb cut off. Eventually, people found this form of punishment to be very disturbing and distasteful and wanted a new form of punishment. But people were worried that if they weren't having others see punishment being done in such a public manner, that they wouldn't be fearful that crime would rise and people would no longer obey the government because they wouldn't be scared. Fear was a common tactic among European countries. It was to keep people in line. These rituals were not done only to criminals, but also to slaves. When we look at the William Lynch letters, slaves would be beaten, whipped, or raped. Even they would often have these kind of set patterns that they would do, just like how we would see criminals being punished. They had set things, they would either be hung or drowned, etc. So with slaves, they would often take the strongest male, beat him until he's almost dead, and they would strap each of their limbs to a horse, to a different horse, obviously. And they would have all the horses run in separate directions so that the slave would be dismembered. These were all horrific ways to scare slaves into submission. After the entire group of people that were now enslaved watched that happen, the women were often raped. Even the men were raped. They would be beaten, and it was a way to keep them in line, to stop them from running away. Or if it was for criminals, it was to stop them from committing crimes or stopping other people from committing crimes by using another person as an example of, okay, if you do this, this is going to happen to you. Once jails and prisons started coming into fruition, jails were often very overcrowded. They were filled with diseases. They had a large amount of violence. And with all of these things in mind, people came up with the prison system where they would commit, punish, and confine people who were convicted of a crime rather than punishing them at such a brutal capacity. They were very controversial. They were extremely expensive, still are to this day. The main questions that people would have was, how would people react and behave being held captive? And would prison systems actually reduce crime? They didn't want prisoners having contact with the outside world or talking to one another. And if they did, they were whipped or sentenced to solitary confinement. Prisons were expensive. And that was a very main concern for people, was the expense, the humanity, and the ability to reduce crime. Funny that humanity was on the line when prior to using prisons, the way that people were punishing was absolutely brutal. So Many prisons, such as the first prison in New York, failed miserably. There were so many riots, and because of these riots, the governments decided prisons needed to be larger and more durable. Extremely violent and dangerous criminals needed to be held in solitary for their entire sentencing. And these cells were about the size of you kind of stretching your elbows out to your side. Not long after they had been in solitary, they began having serious mental health problems from depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, hallucinations. They were becoming sick with diseases and essentially just going insane. As anybody can imagine, being confined into a small room that's almost only as big as you can just walk straight, it can't go well for anyone. Many died, mutilated their bodies, attempted suicide, and because yet another failure, they made prisons into what we see today. So they decided that solitary confinement was still necessary, but not at the level that they were doing it. They made rooms bigger. Prisoners were taught to read and write. They received mental health evaluations. They needed to work out. They would work in factories, making chairs, shoes, or cabinets. And this is the prison system that's been copied across the country, and it's what we use today. Some of the things that are still going on as far as having prisoners make things, when prisons were more privatized, it became more for profit. Many prisoners are often still forced to work for free or extremely cheap labor at either about 93 cents to $4.73 a day, either in making office furniture, working in call centers, slaughterhouses, making shoes, fabricating body armor, taking hotel reservations. And many people argue that this is modern day slavery. Some of the corporations that have used or still use prison labor to this day is places such as Victoria's Secrets, McDonald's, Starbucks, and other countries consider us still using solitary confinement to be considered torture. The origins of policing and essentially bringing people into these prisons started also with slave patrol. The earliest form of slave patrol was created in the Carolinas, I want to say, early 1700s, with just one mission, and it was basically to establish a system of like terror and stop slave uprisings with the capacity to like pursue, capture, and return runaway slaves to their owners. And now modern police departments are being accused of brutality and racial profiling. So it also brings question of how far have these systems actually evolved. You know, as a people, one of the things that, you know, scientists and political scientists have found is that humans, and I'm sure this is common sense, but we're the only creatures that are able to kind of learn and fix ourselves and kind of get better every single time. And it begs the question of, are we doing this in every step? When it comes to the U.S. prison system, have we sat and picked it apart and figured out what we can do better, or have we just swept it under the rug and gotten completely used to the idea of you commit a crime, you go to jail, and that's just kind of the end of it? So, yeah, I think I'm going to leave this right here until we do the next episode, where we do a comparison between the U.S. prison system and other prison systems, which I can't wait to talk about because, man, the difference. The difference is astonishing. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed. And I hope this was long enough because I feel like I haven't talked that long. But thank you. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Bye.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Today I woke up with blood on my hands. I guess last night, mama, I killed a man. Today I woke up with blood on my hands. I guess last night, mama, I killed a man. He was beating on me like I give a fuck. I ain't no killer, mama. I ain't no dog, but if I get cornered, then I gives it up. I have no gun. I had no luck. All I had was my bare hands, they're covered in blood. I've been dreaming about suicide ever since. I can't get the images out of my head. I can't get it out of my head. Today I woke up with blood on my hands. I guess last night, mama, I killed a man. Today I woke up with blood on my hands. I guess last night, mama, I killed a man. I was fucking his bitch, and I understand that he was trying to prove something, but he did not plan. Got the man he would test this time was his last. First grab, then a gasp. He was gone in a flash. Today I realized that I am a beast, like a dragon Loch Ness, but I ain't got no leash. I've been dreaming about suicide ever since. I can't seem to get the images out of my head. I ain't no murderer, mama. No, I ain't no murderer. But if you niggas get too close, I just might murder ya. Murderer, ma. No, I ain't no murderer. But if you niggas get too close, then I just might murder ya. I woke up with blood on my hands. I guess last night, mama, I killed a man. Today I woke up